The lights of Helios Gate sparkled like stars against the darkness of space. The massive station floated between three solar systems, a place where beings from all across the galaxy came to trade, talk, and learn about each other. Inside the station's largest hall, hundreds of aliens gathered for the biggest cooking event in known space. The Galactic Culinary Exhibition happened once every year, and chefs from dozens of worlds competed to show off their best dishes. The hall buzzed with excitement. Aliens of every shape and size filled the seats. Some had forearms, others had tentacles. Some breathed oxygen, others needed special masks. But they all came for the same reason: to see Chef Zarkesh, the 7-time champion, reveal his latest creation. Zarkesh stood on the main stage, his crystalline skin catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. He was a Vraxian, a species known throughout the galaxy for one special gift. Vraxians could eat anything. Their bodies had special organs that broke down poisons, toxins, and deadly chemicals that would kill most other creatures in seconds. This made them the best food testers in space. Kings and presidents hired Vraxians to taste their meals first, making sure no one had poisoned the food. But Zarkesh was more than just a food tester. He was an artist. For 30 years, he had studied cooking from every world he could visit. He learned to combine ingredients that should never go together. He made dishes that other chefs said were impossible, and he won every competition he entered. Tonight he wore his chef's uniform, pure white with silver buttons that matched his skin. His long fingers moved through the air as he spoke, and his voice carried to every corner of the hall through hidden speakers. "Welcome, honored guests, to this year's exhibition," Zarkesh said. His skin shifted from blue to purple, showing his excitement. "Tonight I present my greatest work, a dish I call the Omega Blend. It contains ingredients from 40 different worlds. Some of these ingredients are poisonous to most species here tonight. Some would burn through metal. Some would make you sick just from smelling them. But for me, they are simply flavors waiting to be combined." The crowd leaned forward. Camera drones floated closer to get better angles. News reporters from a dozen planets whispered into their recording devices. Zarkesh continued, his confidence growing with every word. "I have spent my life testing my limits. I have eaten the venom of the Denibian spinecrawler. I have tasted the acid that melts through starship hulls. I have consumed spores that kill in minutes, and I am still here, stronger than ever. I say this not to boast, but to state a simple fact. It is impossible to poison me. My biology makes me immune to all known toxins. I am the perfect chef because I fear nothing on any plate." The audience applauded. Some species clicked their claws. Others hummed in their native languages. The sound filled the hall like waves crashing on a shore. Zarkesh smiled and bowed deeply. His skin flashed gold with pride. In the back row of the hall, far from the stage and the cameras, a group of humans had just arrived. There were 5 of them, all wearing simple gray uniforms with the Earth symbol on their shoulders. Humans were new to this part of space. Only 20 years had passed since Earth made first contact with alien life. 20 years since humans learned they were not alone in the universe. 20 years was nothing compared to the thousands of years most other species had been traveling between stars. Lucy Sullivan stood with her fellow diplomats, watching the stage with tired eyes. She was 28 years old and had worked on Helios Gate for 6 months. Her job was to help humans and aliens understand each other, to solve problems before they became fights, and to show that Earth deserved respect among the older, more powerful species. It was hard work. Every day, Lucy dealt with aliens who saw humans as weak, primitive, and unimportant. Earth had no special powers. Humans could not breathe underwater like the Aquarians. They could not see in complete darkness like the Shadowborn. They could not survive in space without protection like the Void Walkers. They were just soft, fragile creatures from a small blue planet in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. Standing next to Lucy was someone who cared nothing about galactic politics or human reputation. Margaret Sullivan, known to everyone as Maggie, was Lucy's grandmother. She was 72 years old, with short gray hair and sharp brown eyes that missed nothing. She wore a floral dress with small roses on it and comfortable shoes that she called her walking shoes. She looked completely out of place among the aliens and diplomats, and she knew it. She did not care. Maggie had arrived on Helios Gate 3 weeks ago. Lucy had invited her for a month-long visit, thinking her grandmother would enjoy seeing space and meeting aliens. Maggie had agreed because she wanted to spend time with her granddaughter, but she found most of the station boring. The aliens were interesting to look at, sure, but they were just people. They worried about work, complained about their families, and gossiped about their neighbors just like folks back in Ohio. What interested Maggie was food. She had cooked for her family for 50 years. She had won the county fair cooking competition 12 times. She had fed 3 generations of Sullivans, and every one of them remembered her meals. Cooking was not just something Maggie did. It was who she was. So when Lucy suggested they attend the cooking exhibition, Maggie agreed immediately. Finally, something worth seeing. She listened carefully as Zarkesh talked about his special dish and his immunity to poison. She watched him wave his arms and flash his colorful skin. She heard the pride in his voice when he said no one could challenge him. When Zarkesh finished his speech and the crowd applauded again, Maggie leaned close to Lucy and spoke quietly. Her voice was soft, but there was something in it that made Lucy nervous. It was the same tone Maggie used when she decided to reorganize the church bake sale or take over the neighborhood watch meeting. "Honey," Maggie said, "that chef hasn't met Midwestern cooking yet." Lucy turned to look at her grandmother. "Grandma, what do you mean?" Maggie smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the smile she wore when someone told her something could not be done. He thinks being immune to poison makes him unbeatable. But poison isn't the only way to challenge someone. That boy is so busy being impressed with himself that he's forgotten something important. "What's that?" Lucy asked, already dreading the answer. "Pride comes before a fall," Maggie said simply. "And I've knocked down plenty of proud men in my time, usually with a good casserole." Lucy felt a cold worry settle in her stomach. She knew her grandmother. When Maggie made up her mind about something, nothing could change it. Not reason, not pleading, not even common sense. If Maggie decided that Crystal Alien Chef needed to be taken down a notch, then that was exactly what would happen. "Grandma, please don't do anything," Lucy whispered. "This is a diplomatic event. These competitions are very serious. We can't just—" But Maggie was not listening anymore. She was watching Zarkesh on the stage, studying him the way she studied a recipe before trying to improve it. Her mind was already working, already planning. Lucy recognized that look. It was the same look Maggie had before she completely changed the church potluck rules, before she convinced the mayor to fix the roads, before she won her 12th cooking competition, even though the judges said her style was too old-fashioned. On the stage, Zarkesh unveiled his Omega blend. The dish looked like something from a dream or maybe a nightmare. Colors swirled and shifted. Steam rose in strange patterns. The smell reached even the back of the hall, and it made several species quickly put on breathing masks. The few who were brave enough to try the dish ate tiny portions, and most could only manage a single bite. They all agreed it was brilliant, dangerous, and completely unique. Zarkesh won first place, as everyone expected. He accepted his trophy with another deep bow. His skin cycled through every color of the rainbow, showing his joy. Camera drones swarmed around him. Reporters shouted questions. Other chefs came forward to congratulate him or study his technique. The human delegation started to leave. They had seen what they came to see, and they had other duties to attend to. But as they walked toward the exit, Maggie stopped. She looked back at the stage one more time, at the proud chef surrounded by admirers, at the trophy gleaming under the lights. "Lucy," Maggie said, "do they let anyone challenge the champion?" Lucy closed her eyes. She had hoped her grandmother would forget about the chef once they left the hall. She should have known better. "Grandma, you can't be serious." "I'm completely serious," Maggie said. "That chef is talented, I'll give him that. But he's also full of himself. Someone needs to remind him that there's always someone better, or at least someone different. Besides, he insulted human cooking without even knowing it. He called our biology weak. Well, I'd like to show him what a weak human can do in the kitchen." Lucy wanted to argue, but she could see it was useless. When her grandmother decided something was right, nothing in the universe could change her mind. Not logic, not diplomacy, not even the fact that she was on a space station surrounded by aliens who could probably flatten Earth with their advanced weapons. "Yes," Lucy finally said, her voice defeated. "Anyone can challenge the champion. But Grandma, you don't understand what you're getting into." News traveled fast on Helios Gate. By the next morning, every alien on the station knew about Zarkesh's victory at the exhibition. But more importantly, they knew about his speech. The part where he declared himself impossible to poison, unbeatable, and the greatest chef in the galaxy. Those words spread through the station like fire through dry grass. Zarkesh woke up to find himself more famous than ever. His communication device beeped with interview requests. News channels from across the galaxy wanted to talk to him. Other chefs sent messages asking for advice or recipes. Some asked how he managed to handle such dangerous ingredients. Others wanted to know his secret to winning 7 times in a row. He accepted 3 interview requests. The first 2 went perfectly. The reporters asked easy questions and Zarkesh gave confident answers. He talked about his training, his philosophy of cooking, and his dreams for the future. His skin glowed with happiness every time someone called him a genius or a master. The third interview was with a Centauri news anchor named Vexla. She had dark purple skin and 4 eyes that blinked one at a time. Her show was popular across dozens of worlds. She was known for asking tough questions and not accepting simple answers. But Zarkesh was not worried. He felt like nothing could touch him today. Chef Zarkesh, Vexla began, all 4 of her eyes focused on him. Your victory last night was impressive, but some viewers are curious about your comments regarding other species. Specifically, you mentioned that most species cannot handle the ingredients you work with. What do you think about newer species who have joined the galactic community? Species like humans, for example? Zarkesh should have been careful. He should have given a diplomatic answer. Something about respecting all cultures and looking forward to learning from everyone. But he was riding high on his victory. He felt invincible, so he spoke without thinking. Humans? He said, and his skin flickered with amusement. They are charming in their own way, I suppose. But let us be honest. They are newcomers. Babies taking their first steps in space. Their cuisine is primitive compared to what we have developed over millennia. And their biology? Terribly fragile. They need special atmospheres, specific temperatures, careful diets. They cannot even eat the foods most of us consider normal without becoming ill. I mean no disrespect, but humans have a very long way to go before they can compete at this level. Vexla's eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of surprise among her people. Those are strong words, Chef. Do you really believe humans have nothing to offer the galactic culinary scene? Zarkesh waved a hand dismissively. Perhaps they will surprise us one day. But currently, their food is bland and safe. They are afraid of strong flavors, of taking risks. This is natural for a weak species. They must be cautious because their bodies cannot handle challenges. It is not an insult. It is simply biology. The interview continued for another 10 minutes, but the damage was done. Within an hour, the clip of Zarkesh calling humans primitive and weak had been shared across the station's network. Within 2 hours, it had reached Earth. Within 3 hours, every human on Helios Gate had seen it. Lucy was in her office when she saw the clip. She was working on a trade agreement between Earth and the Aquarian delegation, trying to solve a dispute about fishing rights in a shared solar system. Her assistant knocked on the door and asked if she had seen the news. When Lucy said no, the assistant showed her the video on a datapad. Lucy watched the entire interview twice. The first time she felt anger rising in her chest. The second time she felt something worse, embarrassment. She worked so hard to make aliens respect humans, to show them that Earth deserved a place among the stars. And now this famous chef was on galactic television calling her species primitive and weak. The worst part was that some of what Zarkesh said was true. Humans were newcomers. They did have to be careful about what they ate because alien food could be toxic to them. They did need specific conditions to survive. But none of that made them less valuable or less capable. It just made them different. Lucy closed her office door and sat down heavily in her chair. She wanted to write a formal complaint, but she knew it would not help. Zarkesh had not broken any laws. He was just expressing his opinion, even if that opinion was rude and ignorant. The best thing she could do was ignore it and keep working on building good relationships with other species. But then she remembered her grandmother. Maggie had watched the exhibition last night. She had seen Zarkesh's pride and arrogance, and she had said something about teaching him a lesson. Lucy felt a sudden rush of worry. She quickly left her office and headed for her quarters, where Maggie was staying. She found her grandmother in the small kitchen area, surrounded by datapads. Maggie was reading information about Vraxian biology, making notes on a piece of paper with a pencil she had brought from Earth. She looked up when Lucy entered and smiled warmly. "Hello, honey," Maggie said. I've been doing some research. Very interesting species, these Vraxians. Did you know their taste buds are actually more sensitive than ours? All that immunity to poison doesn't help them with strong flavors. Fascinating, really. Lucy sat down across from her grandmother. Grandma, have you seen the interview? Oh, I saw it, Maggie said, her voice calm but her eyes flashing with anger. That chef called us primitive, called our food bland and safe, said we're too weak to take risks. Well, I've been cooking for 50 years and I've never played it safe in my life. That man needs to learn some manners. Grandma, please, Lucy said. I know you're upset. I'm upset too. But we can't let this become a bigger problem. If you challenge him and lose, it will just prove his point. It will make humans look even weaker. Maggie put down her pencil and looked at her granddaughter with the same expression she used to use when Lucy was a child, trying to avoid eating her vegetables. Honey, I'm not going to lose. I've spent the morning learning everything I can about Vraxians. I know what makes them special, and I know where their weaknesses are. Every creature has weaknesses, even ones who think they're invincible. But this isn't just about cooking, Lucy argued. This is about diplomacy, about Earth's reputation. If you challenge him, it becomes an official event. The whole galaxy will be watching. And if I fail, then I fail, Maggie said firmly. But I won't fail. Lucy, you work so hard to make aliens respect humans. You write treaties and solve disputes and attend boring meetings. That's important work, and I'm proud of you for doing it. But sometimes respect doesn't come from diplomacy. Sometimes it comes from showing people what you're really made of. Sometimes you have to stand up and say, you don't know everything about me, so stop assuming you do. Lucy wanted to keep arguing, but she could see the determination in her grandmother's eyes. She had seen that look before, usually right before Maggie did something that everyone said was impossible, like the time she convinced the entire town to change their 4th of July celebration because the fireworks scared the animals, or the time she reorganized the church kitchen over the protests of women who had been running it for 30 years. When Maggie decided something needed to be done, it got done. What exactly are you planning? Lucy asked, resigned to whatever was coming. Maggie smiled and tapped her notes. I'm going to challenge him to a simple cooking contest. Each of us makes one dish. We each have to eat what the other person makes. First one who can't finish their plate loses. Simple, fair, and to the point. And what will you cook? Lucy asked. A hot dish, Maggie said simply. A good old-fashioned Midwestern hot dish. Casserole, if you want to be fancy about it. Nothing exotic, nothing fancy. Just honest cooking from home. Lucy blinked. A casserole? Grandma, he's going to make something with ingredients from 40 different planets. Something that could kill a normal person just from standing too close. And you're going to make a casserole? That's right, Maggie said. See, that chef thinks poison is the ultimate challenge. He thinks his immunity makes him unbeatable. But I've learned something interesting about Vraxians. They can handle toxins, but their taste receptors are actually quite delicate. They evolved to detect subtle differences in food, not to handle overwhelming flavors. Do you know what that means? Lucy shook her head, not sure she wanted to know. It means, Maggie continued, that while he can eat poison all day long, he's never had to deal with really intense flavors. His kind probably eat very mild foods because they focus on chemical safety, not taste intensity. So if I make something that's not poisonous but is extremely flavorful, something that hits those delicate taste buds like a freight train, well, that might be harder for him to handle than any toxin. Lucy stared at her grandmother with new understanding. You're going to overwhelm his senses. Exactly, Maggie said. He'll make something dangerous and toxic. I'll eat it because, honestly, I've eaten your grandfather's cooking for 40 years and that man could burn water. My stomach can handle just about anything. But when he tries my hot dish loaded with every spicy, sharp, intense flavor I can pack into it, his sensitive taste buds won't know what hit them. Lucy had to admit it was a clever plan. It was also completely crazy. But then again, most of Maggie's plans were both clever and crazy. That was just how her grandmother operated. Maggie woke up early the next morning with a mission. She had 3 days to prepare for the biggest cooking challenge of her life, and she was not going to waste a single minute. She dressed in comfortable clothes, pulled her gray hair into a tight bun, and grabbed the shopping list she had made the night before. Lucy had agreed to take the morning off work to help her grandmother navigate the station's market district. As they walked through the corridors, Maggie studied everything with sharp eyes. She watched how different species moved, what they ate, how they talked. She had learned long ago that understanding people was just as important as understanding ingredients. The market district was enormous. It stretched across 3 levels of the station, with shops and stalls selling everything from fresh food to exotic spices to live animals. The air was filled with 1,000 different smells, some wonderful and some terrible. Vendors shouted in dozens of languages, and translator devices buzzed and beeped as they tried to convert alien words into something humans could understand. Maggie walked through the market like she owned it. She stopped at stalls selling vegetables from worlds she had never heard of. She examined fruits that glowed in the dark. She smelled spices that made her eyes water. And she asked questions. Lots of questions. The vendors, most of whom had never met a human before, found themselves answering this small elderly woman, who somehow made them feel like they were talking to their own grandmothers. "What is this?" Maggie asked a 4-armed vendor selling bright purple roots. "Tarshak root," the vendor replied. "Very bitter. Most species cannot eat it raw." Maggie picked up one of the roots and sniffed it. "How do you usually prepare it?" "Boil it for 3 hours to remove the bitterness," the vendor said. "Then it becomes sweet." Maggie nodded and moved on. She was not looking for exotic ingredients. She was looking for information. She wanted to understand how aliens thought about food, what they considered normal, what they considered extreme. The more she learned, the more confident she became in her plan. After 2 hours of exploring, they reached the human section of the market. It was smaller than the other areas, just a few shops selling earth foods for the human workers on the station, but it had everything Maggie needed. She bought fresh ghost peppers, Carolina Reapers, habaneros, jalapenos, and serrano peppers. She found real horseradish, not the processed kind, and fresh wasabi root. She purchased aged cheddar cheese, sharp enough to make your eyes water. She bought onions, garlic, and a dozen other ingredients that made Lucy's nose wrinkle just from smelling them. "Grandma," Lucy said, watching her grandmother pile ingredients into a shopping cart, "are you trying to make food or a weapon?" Maggie laughed. "Sometimes, honey, they're the same thing. Your grandfather always said my cooking could wake the dead. I'm planning to wake up that smug chef instead." Back in Lucy's quarters, Maggie unpacked her purchases and began organizing them on the counter. She worked with the efficiency of someone who had cooked thousands of meals. Each ingredient had its place. Each one served a purpose in her plan. Lucy sat at the small table and pulled up information about Vraxians on her datapad. "Grandma, I've been reading more about Vraxian biology. Are you sure about this? Their digestive system is incredibly advanced. They have multiple stomachs, specialized organs for neutralizing toxins, and enzymes that can break down almost any compound." "I know all that," Maggie said, chopping an onion with quick practice movements. "I spent yesterday reading every article I could find about Vraxians. I know about their special biology. But here's what I also learned. They evolved on a planet with very dangerous plants and animals. Everything on their world tried to poison them, so their bodies developed ways to handle chemical threats. But you know what their world didn't have?" "What?" Lucy asked. "Intense flavors," Maggie said. "Their planet had dangerous chemicals, but not particularly strong tastes. So Vraxians evolved to detect subtle differences in food, tiny amounts of poison, minute chemical variations. That means their taste buds are actually more sensitive than ours, not less. They can taste things we can't even detect. But that sensitivity is also a weakness. If you hit those delicate taste buds with overwhelming flavor, with concentrated heat and sharpness and intensity, their nervous system won't know how to handle it." Lucy thought about this. "So you're basically going to overload his senses." "Exactly," Maggie said. "He can eat poison all day long because his body neutralizes it before it reaches his taste buds. But pure flavor, intense and concentrated, goes straight to those sensitive receptors. There's nothing his special organs can do about taste. And humans, well, we've spent thousands of years eating increasingly spicy and flavorful foods just because we like them. We've trained our taste buds to handle intensity. He hasn't." "That's actually brilliant," Lucy admitted. "But Grandma, you have to eat his dish too. What if he makes something that's really poisonous? What if it makes you sick?" Maggie smiled and pulled a small bottle from her bag. "This is why I talked to the station's human doctor yesterday. He gave me these pills. They coat the stomach, neutralize acids, and help with digestion. I'm going to take 3 of them right before the challenge. Plus, I've been eating spicy food for 70 years. My stomach is tougher than most people think. And I know how to keep a straight face even when something tastes terrible, Your grandfather's meatloaf taught me that skill. Over the next 2 days, Maggie experimented with her recipe. She used Lucy's small kitchen to test different combinations of ingredients. She tried various peppers, mixed different ratios, and adjusted the flavors until she found the perfect balance. The casserole needed to be edible, technically speaking, but it also needed to be overwhelmingly intense. Lucy came home one evening to find the apartment filled with a smell so strong it made her eyes water from the hallway. She opened the door carefully and found Maggie stirring a pot on the stove, apparently unbothered by the fumes that would have sent most people running. "Grandma, are you okay?" Lucy asked, covering her nose. "Perfect," Maggie said cheerfully. "I'm testing the sauce. I think I've got it just right now. Want to try a taste?" "Absolutely not," Lucy said. "Grandma, I have to work tomorrow. I can't spend the night in the medical bay." Maggie laughed and turned off the stove. "Don't worry, I'll open the windows. This is just the preliminary test. The final version will be even stronger." "Even stronger?" Lucy said weakly. "Grandma, you're going to kill someone." "Nonsense," Maggie said. "It's just food. Very flavorful food, but still just food. No one has ever died from my cooking. Well, except for your grandfather's goldfish, but that was an accident. I didn't know fish couldn't eat lasagna." While Maggie prepared, Zarkesh was doing his own preparation. But his approach was very different. He spent his time in his professional kitchen, surrounded by exotic ingredients from across the galaxy. He had containers of venom, bottles of acid, jars of toxic spores. He treated the challenge like a science experiment, calculating exact measurements and testing different combinations for maximum danger. His assistants watched nervously as he worked. They had seen him create dangerous dishes before, but this was different. He was not trying to impress judges or win a competition. He was trying to prove a point. He wanted to show everyone, especially humans, that there were levels of cooking they could never reach. "Chef," one of his assistants said carefully, "are you certain about this challenge? The human is just a civilian. She has no professional training. Wouldn't it be more impressive to compete against another master chef?" Zarkesh's skin flickered with annoyance. "That is precisely the point. This human grandmother thinks she can challenge me after I called her species primitive. She wants to defend her people's honor or some such nonsense. I am going to show her and everyone watching that there are fundamental differences between species. Some of us are simply more advanced, more capable. It is not cruel to state facts." The assistant said nothing more. He had worked for Zarkesh for 5 years and knew better than to argue when the chef had made up his mind. But privately, he wondered if his employer was making a mistake. He had met a few humans during his time on Helios Gate, and they had surprised him with their determination and creativity. They were not physically impressive, but they had a way of finding solutions that no one else thought of. Maybe this grandmother was like that too. As the challenge day approached, the entire station buzzed with excitement. News crews arrived from neighboring systems. Betting pools grew larger. Some species organized viewing parties. The exhibition hall prepared for what they expected to be the most watched event in their history. Most of the attention focused on Zarkesh. Reporters asked him about his strategy, his ingredients, his confidence level. He answered every question with supreme self-assurance. He described the dish he planned to make, a creation he called the xenophage, which would contain the deadliest substances he had ever combined. He explained that it would be beautiful, elegant, and absolutely lethal to any species except Vraxians. "And what about the human?" one reporter asked. "Are you concerned about her at all?" Zarkesh laughed, his skin flashing with amusement. "Concerned? No, curious perhaps. I am interested to see what she thinks passes for a..." The exhibition hall was packed. Every seat was filled and hundreds more beings stood in the back or floated near the ceiling, depending on their species. Camera drones buzzed through the air like mechanical bees, their lenses focused on the stage. Screens around the hall showed the scene to those who could not see directly. Outside the hall, thousands more watched on public monitors throughout the station. Across the galaxy, billions tuned in to see the famous Vraxian chef face off against the unknown human grandmother. The stage had been divided into 2 cooking stations. On the left side, Zarkesh's area gleamed with professional equipment. Expensive knives hung on magnetic strips. Temperature-controlled surfaces kept ingredients at perfect conditions. Everything was organized with military precision. On the right side, Maggie's station looked simple by comparison. Basic cooking equipment, a standard oven, and her ingredients laid out on a plain counter. It looked like someone's home kitchen had been transported to the stage. A Centauri judge stood between the two stations. His name was Torvan, and he had overseen cooking competitions for 30 years. He was known for being fair, neutral, and impossible to bribe. His 4 eyes swept over the crowd before he spoke into his microphone. "Welcome to this historic challenge," Torvan announced. His voice boomed through the speakers. "Today we witness a contest between Chef Zarkesh, 7-time champion of the Galactic Culinary Exhibition, and Margaret Sullivan of Earth. The rules are simple. Each chef will prepare one dish. Both chefs must attempt to consume what their opponent creates. The first chef to concede defeat will lose. Medical teams from multiple species are standing by, though we hope they will not be needed." The crowd murmured with excitement. Maggie stood at her station wearing a simple apron over her floral dress. She looked calm, almost relaxed, like she was about to cook Sunday dinner for her family. Zarkesh wore his professional chef's uniform, crisp and white. His crystalline skin reflected the stage lights, creating patterns that danced across the walls. "Chefs, you have 2 hours to prepare your dishes," Torvan continued. "You may begin now." Zarkesh moved immediately. His hands flew over his ingredients with practiced speed. He had prepared for this moment. He knew exactly what he was going to make and how long each step would take. He started with a base of concentrated alkaloids extracted from death spores, mixing them with acidic gel from Titan's subsurface ocean. The mixture bubbled and hissed, releasing fumes that made the nearest camera drone retreat quickly. Maggie worked more slowly. She started by browning ground beef in a large pan, adding onions that she had minced so fine they were almost paste. The smell of cooking meat and onions filled her side of the stage. It was ordinary, familiar, almost comforting. People in the audience who recognized Earth food relaxed slightly. Maybe this would not be as dangerous as they had feared. They were wrong. As Zarkesh added venom from a Danubian spine crawler to his mixture, Maggie began preparing her peppers. She had brought 6 different varieties, each one hotter than the last. She chopped them carefully, removing the seeds where most of the heat concentrated, but she was not throwing the seeds away. She was saving them for later, grinding them into a fine powder that would be mixed into every layer of her dish. Lucy sat in the front row, her hands clenched in her lap. She watched her grandmother work and tried not to think about everything that could go wrong. Next to her sat the other members of the human delegation, all of them looking nervous. Behind them, aliens of various species chatted and made predictions. Most of them expected this to be over quickly. The human would try one bite of Zarkesh's creation and give up immediately. An hour passed. Zarkesh's dish was taking shape. It looked like something from another world, which made sense since it contained ingredients from 40 different planets. Colors shifted across its surface. Small flames danced on top of the mixture, even through the protective barriers around his station. Some species reported feeling nauseous just from being near it. Maggie assembled her hot dish in layers. First, the beef mixed with those finely chopped onions and her special hot sauce. Then a layer of potatoes that she had infused with wasabi, creating a sharp, nose-clearing heat that would combine with the pepper heat in interesting ways. Then a layer of vegetables that she had marinated in a mixture of horseradish and vinegar. Each layer looked innocent enough on its own, but together they formed something that would challenge even the toughest human palate. The final layer was cheese, but not just any cheese. Maggie had found the sharpest, most aged cheddar available on the station. She mixed it with pepper jack cheese, adding even more heat. She grated it finely and spread it across the top of her casserole. Then she added one final touch, a sprinkle of Carolina Reaper powder, the hottest substance she had brought from Earth. It would bake into the cheese, creating a crust that would deliver an intense blast of flavor with every bite. As Maggie put her dish into the oven, Zarkesh was adding his final ingredients. He worked with small vials and careful measurements, creating something that was part food and part chemical weapon. He smiled as he worked, his skin flashing with confidence. This dish would be his masterpiece. Not only would it win the challenge, but it would also demonstrate the vast gap between species like his and species like humans. The 2 hours ended. Both dishes were complete. Torvan stepped forward again, his 4 eyes examining both creations. Zarkesh's dish, which he had named the xenophage, sat on a crystal plate. It seemed to move slightly, though that might have been an optical illusion caused by the steam rising from it. Strange lights played across its surface. The smell alone made several species quickly put on breathing filters. Maggie's hot dish looked exactly like what it was: a casserole. The cheese on top had browned to a perfect golden color. It smelled like comfort food, like something you might find at a family dinner. There was nothing obviously threatening about it. Several aliens in the audience laughed. This was what the human brought to challenge the great Zarkesh: a simple casserole. Chef Zarkesh will present his dish first, Torvan announced. Margaret Sullivan must attempt to consume a full serving. Chef, please explain your creation. Zarkesh stepped forward, his skin cycling through proud colors. I present the xenophage, a dish that combines the deadliest ingredients from across the galaxy. It contains concentrated alkaloids that would kill most species in seconds, acidic compounds that can melt through metal, venom from creatures that hunt in the darkness between stars, spores that cause instant paralysis in 90% of known species. For any being except a Vraxian, this dish is certain death. But for those with the proper biology, it is simply a complex combination of flavors. The audience fell silent. Medical teams moved closer to the stage. Lucy felt her heart pounding. This was real poison her grandmother was about to eat. Real toxins that could kill her. She wanted to jump up and stop this, but she knew Maggie would never forgive her. Her grandmother had made her choice, and Lucy had to trust her. Maggie walked over to Zarkesh's station. She looked at the dish without expression. Then she picked up a fork, took a serving, and returned to her own station. She sat down in the chair that had been provided, the plate in front of her. The entire hall held its breath. Maggie raised the fork to her mouth and took the first bite. She chewed slowly, thoughtfully, as if she was tasting soup at a church potluck. Her face remained neutral. No sign of pain, no sign of struggle. She swallowed and took another bite. And another. The crowd began murmuring. This was not supposed to happen. Humans were fragile. They could not handle toxins like this. And yet here was this elderly woman eating poison like it was perfectly normal food. What the audience did not know was that Maggie had prepared for this moment. Before coming to the hall, she had taken 3 different stomach-coating medications. She had also spent 50 years developing what her family called an iron stomach by eating her own experimental cooking, which was often questionable in both taste and safety. Her grandfather had joked that Maggie could eat nails and spit out screws. While that was not literally true, she could certainly handle food that would send most people running for the nearest bathroom. But more importantly, Maggie had learned something crucial during her years of entering cooking competitions. Never show weakness. Even if something tasted terrible, even if it made your eyes water and your stomach churn, you kept a straight face. You acted like everything was fine. You made your opponent doubt themselves. And right now, watching Zarkesh's skin flicker with confusion, Maggie knew her strategy was working. She finished the entire serving in 10 minutes. When she set down her fork, the hall erupted in shocked murmurs. Species that had bet against her suddenly looked worried. The human medical team relaxed slightly, though they kept their equipment ready just in case. Lucy felt tears of relief starting to form, but she blinked them away. The challenge was only half over. Torvan looked genuinely surprised. Margaret Sullivan has successfully consumed Chef Zarkesh's dish. Now it is the chef's turn. Margaret Sullivan, please present your creation. Maggie stood up and walked to her station. She picked up her hot dish and carried it to the center of the stage. She set it down gently and smiled. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours, every civilized world knew what had happened. The great Zarkesh, the Vraxian master chef who claimed to be impossible to poison, had been defeated by a human grandmother with a casserole. The story was so unexpected, so perfectly ironic that it captured everyone's imagination. News networks played the footage over and over. The moment when Zarkesh took his first bite became the most watched clip in recent history. Viewers from 1,000 worlds watched his crystalline skin flash through colors like a broken rainbow. They saw his hands shake and his confidence crumble. And they saw Maggie standing calmly at her station, looking exactly like what she was. A grandmother who had just taught someone a lesson they desperately needed to learn. The reaction was divided. Some species laughed at Zarkesh, saying he had been too proud and deserved what happened. Others defended him, arguing that it was not fair to use such extreme flavors against someone whose taste buds were so sensitive. A few species tried to remain neutral, saying both chefs had shown impressive skills in different ways. But everyone had an opinion, and everyone wanted to talk about it. Humans suddenly found themselves being treated differently on Helios Gate. Aliens who had ignored them before now stopped to talk. Some wanted to know more about Earth food. Others wanted to meet the famous grandmother. A few even apologized for thinking humans were weak and primitive. Lucy found her job as a diplomat suddenly much easier. When people respected your grandmother, they tended to respect you too. But the most interesting reaction came from Zarkesh himself. After the challenge ended, he had been taken to the medical bay not because he was injured, but because his nervous system needed time to recover from the sensory overload. The Vraxian doctors checked him carefully and declared him perfectly healthy. His special organs had protected him from any actual harm, but his pride had taken a beating that no medicine could cure. For 2 days, Zarkesh stayed in his apartment. He refused all interview requests. He ignored messages from colleagues and competitors. He did not cook, did not study recipes, did not plan his next dish. He just sat and thought about what had happened. For the first time in 30 years, he questioned everything he believed about himself and his abilities. He had been so sure of his superiority. He had spent decades building his reputation, winning competitions, proving he was the best. He had based his entire identity on being unbeatable, on having abilities no one else possessed. And then a 72-year-old human with no professional training had found the one weakness he never knew he had. She had not used poison or exotic ingredients or advanced techniques. She had just used knowledge, preparation, and a deep understanding of how flavors worked. It was humbling in a way nothing else had ever been. On the 3rd day after the challenge, someone knocked on his door. Zarkesh considered ignoring it, but curiosity won. He opened the door to find Maggie standing there, holding a covered dish. Lucy stood beside her grandmother, looking apologetic. "Hello, Chef," Maggie said warmly. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. I wanted to bring you something as a peace offering." Zarkesh's skin flickered uncertainly. Part of him wanted to close the door. But another part of him, the part that had always been curious about learning new things, wanted to know what this remarkable human had brought him. He stepped aside and gestured for them to enter. His apartment was exactly what you would expect from a master chef. The kitchen was enormous, filled with equipment from dozens of worlds. Cookbooks lined the walls, some written in languages that had not been spoken in centuries. Jars and containers held ingredients that most beings had never heard of. It was a temple to cooking, and Zarkesh had been its high priest. Until 3 days ago. Maggie set her dish on the counter and removed the cover. Inside was a simple cake with light vanilla frosting. It looked homemade. Not perfect like something from a professional bakery, but honest and inviting. The smell of vanilla and butter filled the kitchen. "I made you a butter cake," Maggie explained. "Nothing spicy, nothing sharp, nothing overwhelming. Just a simple, sweet cake like I used to make for my grandchildren when they were upset. I thought you might appreciate something gentle after what happened." Zarkesh stared at the cake. His first instinct was to refuse it, to maintain his wounded pride. But something about the gesture touched him. This woman had defeated him publicly, in front of the entire galaxy. She could have been cruel about it. She could have gloated or mocked him. Instead, she brought him cake and spoke kindly. It was not what he expected from a competitor. It was not what he would have done if their positions were reversed. "Why?" he asked simply. His voice was quiet, not the confident boom he usually used. "Why did you come here? You won. You humiliated me in front of everyone. Why show me kindness now?" Maggie pulled out a chair and sat down at his kitchen table, gesturing for him to join her. Lucy stood by the door, trying to be invisible. This conversation needed to happen between the two chefs, not with an audience. "I didn't want to humiliate you," Maggie said. "I wanted to teach you something. You're an incredibly talented chef, Zarkesh. I watched recordings of your previous competitions. Your technique is flawless. Your knowledge of ingredients is vast. Your creativity is impressive. You deserve your reputation, but you are missing something important." "What was I missing?" Zarkesh asked, genuinely curious now. "Humility," Maggie said gently, "and understanding that every species, every culture, every person has something valuable to offer. You called humans primitive. You said our food was bland and safe. You assume that because we're newcomers to space, we have nothing to teach you. But that assumption was wrong. My culture has been developing cooking techniques for thousands of years, just like yours. We've learned different things because we face different challenges. That doesn't make us primitive. It makes us different. Zarkesh's skin shifted to a subdued blue. The color Vraxians showed when they were thinking deeply. You are right, he admitted. I was arrogant. I thought my immunity to poison made me superior to everyone else. I never considered that there might be challenges I was not prepared for. I never thought about what I could learn from others, only what I could teach them. We all make that mistake sometimes, Maggie said. I've done it myself. The important thing is learning from it. Now, would you like to try the cake? I promise it won't hurt. Zarkesh cut a small piece of cake and tasted it carefully. His eyes widened with surprise. The flavor was subtle, delicate, perfectly balanced. His sensitive taste buds, still recovering from the hot dish challenge, could detect every nuance. The vanilla was pure and sweet. The butter was rich without being overwhelming. The frosting added just enough sweetness without dominating the cake. It was simple, but it was also perfect in its simplicity. This is beautiful, he said quietly. So gentle, so refined. I can taste every ingredient clearly. The balance is exquisite, Maggie smiled. That's the other thing I wanted to show you. Power isn't everything in cooking. Sometimes the most impressive dish is the gentlest one. Sometimes showing restraint takes more skill than showing force. You can make dishes that kill with poison and dazzle with exotic ingredients. But can you make something that comforts? Can you create food that makes people feel safe and loved? That's a different kind of cooking, but it's just as important. They talked for hours. Maggie told him about Earth cooking traditions, about regional differences, about how food connected to family and memory and culture. Zarkesh shared his own experiences, talking about Vraxian cuisine and the challenges of cooking for a species that could eat anything. They discovered they had more in common than either expected. They both loved food. They both understood that cooking was more than just combining ingredients. It was communication, art, and love all mixed together. When the conversation finally wound down, Zarkesh made a decision. I need to make a public statement, he said. I promise that if you won, I would acknowledge that humans have valuable contributions to make to galactic culture. But I want to say more than that. I want to apologize for my arrogance and invite you to teach me about human cooking. If you are willing. Maggie studied him carefully. She had been judging character for 70 years, and she had gotten good at it. She saw genuine remorse in his expression, real curiosity in his eyes. This was not a proud chef trying to save face. This was someone who had learned a hard lesson and wanted to grow from it. I'll do better than teach you, Maggie said. I'll work with you. We can learn from each other. You can show me Vraxian techniques and ingredients from across the galaxy. I'll share Earth cooking methods and the philosophy behind them. We'll create something new together, something that combines both our approaches. What do you say? Zarkesh's skin flashed gold, the color of joy and excitement. I would be honored. But I have one condition. What's that? Maggie asked. Promise me you will never make that hot dish again, Zarkesh said. And for the first time since the challenge, he smiled. Or at least warn me if you do, Maggie laughed. Deal. Though I might make a milder version for other species. I think there's a market for human spicy food out here. The next day, Zarkesh held a press conference. News crews from across 6 months passed quickly. Maggie's temporary stay on Helios Gate turned into one of the most productive periods of her life. She taught cooking classes 3 times a week, attended by aliens from dozens of species. Some came to learn about human food. Others came just to meet the famous grandmother who had defeated Zarkesh. But they all left with new knowledge and new respect for Earth culture. The classes were always interesting, sometimes in unexpected ways. Maggie learned that some species could not taste sweetness, so desserts meant nothing to them. Others found the concept of spicy fascinating because their home planets had no equivalent. A few species could not eat cooked food at all and had to adapt her recipes for raw consumption. But everyone learned something, and Maggie learned just as much from her students as they learned from her. Her partnership with Zarkesh flourished. They worked together almost every day, creating new dishes that combined Earth ingredients with alien ones. Some experiments failed spectacularly. A casserole made with Centauri cave fungus turned bright purple and started moving on its own. A soup combining Earth tomatoes with Aquarian sea vegetables smelled so terrible they had to evacuate the kitchen. But many experiments succeeded, creating food that both species found delicious. Their most successful creation was something they called Unity Stew. It used vegetables from 5 different planets, spices from Earth and 3 alien worlds, and a cooking technique that combined Vraxian chemical knowledge with Earth slow cooking traditions. The result was a dish that almost any species could eat and enjoy. It became the signature meal at diplomatic dinners on Helios Gate, a symbol of how different cultures could work together to create something new and good. Zarkesh changed during those 6 months. He was still proud of his skills, but his pride was different now. It was no longer the arrogant pride of someone who thought they were better than everyone else. It was the quiet pride of someone who knew their worth but also knew their limits. He laughed more. He listened more. He stopped trying to impress everyone and started trying to connect with them instead. One evening, after a particularly successful cooking class, Zarkesh and Maggie sat in his kitchen sharing tea. Vraxian tea made from plants that grew in volcanic soil, with a taste Maggie described as interesting but not terrible. They had fallen into a comfortable routine over the months, often spending evenings talking about food, life, and philosophy. "I have been thinking," Zarkesh said, his skin a thoughtful blue, "about what you said the day you brought me the butter cake. You asked if I could create food that comforts people. I have been trying to do that in our recent work, but I find it difficult. My training focused on impressing, on showing technical skill, on pushing boundaries. Comfort is harder than I expected." Maggie sipped her tea and smiled. "Comfort food isn't about technique. It's about emotion. You have to cook with love, not just skill. You have to think about who will eat your food and what they need. Are they sad? Make them something warm and filling. Are they stressed? Make them something that reminds them of simpler times. Are they lonely? Make them something that feels like home. The ingredients don't matter as much as the intention behind them. But how do I know what people need?" Zarkesh asked. "How do I understand emotions I have never felt or experiences I have never had?" "You ask them," Maggie said simply. "You talk to them. You learn their stories. You understand what makes them happy or sad or scared. And then you cook something that speaks to that. It's not about being the best chef. It's about being the most caring one." Zarkesh was quiet for a long moment. Then his skin shifted to gold, the color of revelation. "I think I finally understand what I was missing all those years. I thought cooking was about the food, but it is really about the people who eat it. The food is just the medium, like paint for an artist or words for a writer. The real art is in connecting with others, in making them feel something important." "Now you're getting it," Maggie said warmly. "Took you long enough," they both laughed. It was a sound that had become common over the past months. The sound of genuine friendship between 2 very different beings who had learned to appreciate each other. As Maggie's 6 months drew to a close, she found herself torn. Part of her wanted to go home to Ohio, to her house and her garden and her friends at church. But another part of her had fallen in love with life on Helios Gate. She had never imagined at her age that she would travel to space, meet aliens, and help change how species viewed each other. It was an adventure she never expected, and she was not quite ready for it to end. Lucy noticed her grandmother's hesitation. One night, a week before Maggie was scheduled to return to Earth, Lucy brought up the subject over dinner. They were eating in Lucy's quarters, just the 2 of them, having a quiet meal of Earth food that Maggie had prepared. "Grandma," Lucy said carefully, "you don't have to go back if you don't want to. The station administrator asked me yesterday if you might consider staying longer. They want to make your position permanent, cultural consultant and culinary advisor. You'd have your own apartment, a proper salary, and full access to any resources you need. They think you're making a real difference here." Maggie set down her fork and looked at her granddaughter. "Is that what you want? For me to stay?" "I want whatever makes you happy," Lucy said. "You've done so much for our family over the years. You raised me when Mom and Dad were working long hours. You were always there for everyone who needed you. Maybe it's time for you to do something just for yourself. If staying here makes you happy, then stay. If going home makes you happy, then go. Either way, I'll support you." Maggie thought about it for a long time. She thought about her house in Ohio, sitting empty except when her children visited. She thought about her friends, most of whom were also getting older and dealing with their own lives. She thought about her routine back home. cooking, gardening, attending church, entering the occasional cooking competition. It was a good life, but it had become predictable. Comfortable, but maybe too comfortable. Then she thought about Helios Gate. She thought about Zarkesh and the friendship they had built. She thought about her students, beings from across the galaxy who wanted to learn from her. She thought about the new recipes she was creating, the cultures she was learning about, the difference she was making in how species viewed each other. At 72, she had found a new purpose, a new adventure, a new way to make the world, or rather the galaxy, a better place. "I'll stay," Maggie said finally, "at least for another year. I can always visit Earth and my family can visit me here, but I think I'm needed here right now. And honestly, honey, I'm having the time of my life. Your grandfather always said I should try new things. I don't think he imagined I'd try living in space, but I think he'd approve." Lucy hugged her grandmother tightly. "I'm so glad. Having you here has been wonderful. And you're right, you are making a difference. Human applications to join the diplomatic service have tripled since the challenge. Everyone back on Earth wants to be like the grandmother who defeated the alien chef. You've become a hero." "I'm not a hero," Maggie said, embarrassed. "I just made a casserole." "You made a statement," Lucy corrected. "You showed everyone that humans aren't weak or primitive. You proved that we have our own strengths, our own knowledge, our own value, and you did it in the most human way possible, with food and stubbornness and a grandmother's determination to teach someone a lesson." News of Maggie's decision to stay spread quickly through the station. Her next cooking class had a waiting list of over 100 beings. Food vendors asked her to develop new recipes for them. The station's main restaurant wanted to add a permanent section of Earth cuisine to their menu, with Maggie as the consultant. She was busier than she had ever been in Ohio, and she loved every minute of it. Zarkesh was particularly pleased. He had grown to depend on Maggie's practical wisdom and her ability to see past technical details to the heart of what cooking should be. When he learned she was staying, his skin flashed through happy colors for an entire day. He immediately proposed a new project. They would write a cookbook together, combining recipes from Earth and the greater galaxy, with commentary from both their perspectives. It would be the first truly collaborative cookbook between human and alien chefs. They started work on the cookbook the following week. It quickly became clear this was going to be a massive project. There were so many ingredients to catalog, so many techniques to explain, so many cultural contexts to describe. But they approached it with enthusiasm, working together to create something that would help other species understand each other through food. The cookbook's working title was Cooking Without Boundaries, a human and Vraxian perspective. Each recipe would be presented twice, once with Maggie's practical home cooking approach, and once with Zarkesh's more technical, professional method. The idea was to show that there was no single right way to cook, that both approaches had value, and that the best results often came from combining different perspectives. As the months passed and Maggie settled into her new permanent life on Helios Gate, something remarkable happened across the galaxy. Other species started seeking out human culture more actively. Human